Thank you and good evening. Hi. Um, Before we get started, my name is Shannon McFadden, and this is my talk on classroom activism, um, as well as just some organizations I work with in the community and how to better assist them as far as financial resources so they can continue to do great things. So, a little bit about myself. I am a mother of one. Her name is Sharice. She's the apple of my eye. I am a former special educator in Prince George's County Public Schools and the District of Columbia Public Schools, where I worked primarily with children with learning disabilities, children with learning disabilities, as well as those who had behavioral difficulties. In that in that realm, I did that for 7 years. In that capacity, I learned that a lot of the children that um, I worked with needed more than just um, a teacher. They needed a parent, they needed a counselor, they needed someone to bring them food in the morning. They needed all of these things to just help better facilitate their learning process. Um, After I left teaching, I started working with adults with special needs for a nonprofit agency that works primarily with adults with special needs as well as some forensic involvement, which means they got involved in the court system at some point. Um, and I also noticed the same thing with them. So what happened was I always loved teaching and I had the passion for it, but I didn't not understand, I didn't appreciate or like, for better terms, the policy and the bureaucracy that came with it. So even though there's this push to be more culturally responsible and to differentiate and to create and think outside the box, everything was designed around testing. Testing, 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 testing. And even in my personal life, my daughter, she's brilliant, brilliant, but she does not do well with computer tests, and she's 6. So I see how even in with her, testing can put her in a box that is unrealistic, that doesn't fully capture who she is as a student and as a person. And working with her, continuously working with the students that I tutor now, that's how my blog came about. We want our children to learn, but outside of the context of the real world. So, one of the things that I used to do with my students, my older ones, is that as we went through each language arts skill, they had to do a petition, they had to, what was that site, change.org? We have a few petitions on there from years ago. They had to write to their congressman. They had to do these different things because I wanted to show how education impacts their lives, not just this is what you do in order to get above average on Park or MSA or Miss Pap or whatever else they're going to change it to, but how do you use your education to truly change the circumstances and situations that you're in. So in October of 2017, we had that wonderful Charlottesville, Virginia thing that happened. And one of my friends who does a blog called Classroom Culture, she said, "Hey, Shannon, can you write a piece for me?" I said, "All right, cool." So I wrote her a piece. It got a very, very positive response. And so I said, a lot of teachers want to incorporate these things in a classroom, but they just don't know how. They don't know what it looks like, and they don't know how to truly capture activism and still tie in the standards and the Common Core objectives. So classroom activism was born. And in that, I talk about how when we are thinking about culture and thinking about activism, how teachers can see those traits in their students, and at the same time use education to pull out the positive traits and kind of help the students deal with the negative ones. I did this one piece, and it was my favorite one to write, and it was on complexion. And again, it's this big push for culturally responsive teaching, and the whole premise is if you have a bunch of white students, have a white teacher, have a bunch of black students, have a black teacher, have a bunch of Hispanic students, have a Hispanic teacher, but my black experience isn't the same as the next person's black experience, and someone's white experience isn't the same as somebody else's white experience. So it's kind of putting a Band-Aid on a larger issue, because you can have a teacher of the same race and they still don't understand that student and their struggle. So in the black community, we have various complexions, and historically, the lighter you are, the better you are. And this blog article came about when one of my friends asked me to talk to her daughter about her complexion, because she's, well, y'all don't know, but she's a couple shades darker than me. And she wanted me to talk to her about her beauty and this and this. And I said, well, I can, but it's not going to be the same because I'm not her mom. So even if I talk to her about it, the fact that you still make comments about darker skinned women that you see on television is not going to compute, and it's not going to do anything. It's just going to be another person telling her she's beautiful. But yet, we are reflected by how our parents see us. So this blog article I wrote, I think it was right after my father passed in January. And I talked about how, as parents, we lay the foundation for the beauty that our children see in themselves. And that even though in my house I was the darkest one, my parents praised my complexion. They praised who I was. They praised what I looked like. And I talked about how in the classroom, when you look at it subculturally, you don't see, a lot of times teachers, especially those of a different race, you don't see those underlying issues when it comes to complexion, where even though the literature may have a black face, it's not going to really resonate with the students who are darker, because we've been raised by Disney Channel and Nickelodeon to have the light-skinned friend who is the smart one, who's the pretty one, and the dark-skinned one who is the comic relief. If you watch Martin, Pam and Gina. You watch House Party, A.J. Johnson's character and Tisha Campbell's character. If you watch The Proud Family, and I can go on and on and on and on and on. So I gave tips to teachers on how they can look and facilitate student interaction and help them see past the complexion. Another article I did was on, and this was the funny one. This was the Talented 10th one that no one liked. And it was crazy because no one liked it because I talked about how we keep pushing all these black kids to go to college. But if they don't want to go to college, then what? So the next thing they're doing, they out here selling drugs, and you're mad because they're selling drugs. But you didn't tell them that they didn't have to go to college. You didn't tell them that they could be a plumber and make way more money than I do with 2 degrees. You didn't tell them that they could be an HVAC specialist. You didn't tell them that they can own a business. You didn't tell them they could be a carpenter. You didn't tell them that there are so many skilled trades that they could do that would create financial wealth and economic stability, and in the same time be able to differentiate your lessons to include that. For example, one lesson I did, particularly with my 5th graders, was I had to teach them about area, diameter, and all those great, wonderful things. But instead of me having them do paper tests, I found this computer program online. It was free. And I gave them the formulas, and they had to build a house, build a room, furnish it, put carpet, flooring, all of those things down, and it had to make sense. So in order to build this house, they had to know formulas, how to actually apply what they're learning to the real world. And with that, that student graduated from high school, and he texted me on Facebook and told me that he's now a licensed carpenter at 18. And that's the beauty of differentiation and learning how to just look at the kids and see where they are. And even though we don't think that's activism, we don't think that that's anything to brag about, empowering your children to change their communities is the greatest thing ever. I did some research on the connections between special education, culturally responsive teaching, and juvenile delinquency. And one of the things that I noticed was that students who were in areas, impoverished areas, but were unable to connect to the education that they were given, were the ones that perpetuated the state that their communities were in. And it was weird because when I was doing this presentation, the young lady I was presenting after, she and I would joke about how we had to exchange lives because, again, thinking about it from a cultural perspective, when seeing me, people don't see 2 degrees, 2-parent home, private school, grew up in the suburbs. They see, well, maybe her father was around, maybe he wasn't around. Maybe she went to school, maybe she didn't go to school. Shaved sides, tattoos. And this lady, she looked like your average run-of-the-mill white girl. But she grew up with just her mom. Her dad was in and out of jail. Her mother was getting high all the time. She had siblings who were getting high all the time. So it was a matter of us learning. I'm sorry, that lady threw me off, y'all. Oh my God. She threw me off. So it was a matter of really, really focusing on the subculture of the students that you're teaching. So going back to my point before, just because you put the same race in front of a group of students does not mean that they're going to relate. You have to dig deeper and look at your children's subculture, the student subculture that you're teaching. And this blog really digs deep into subculture issues. I can't speak on every subculture because I can't experience it. But as far as looking at students of color, understanding the subculture of each helps you better understand, helps you better grasp them, and really, really give them the materials that they need to grow, to mature, to become educated, and actually love learning. So at this point, I'm going to stop talking and ask if anybody has any questions before I go into the next part of my presentation, and talking about just how to be more active in the community as well as the different organizations that I work with. Any questions? Nope. Questions, yes. Mm-hmm. Wow, that was a good question. Okay, so the question was, how did I respond to negativity from my Talented 10th blog article? Um, I didn't, in that I knew it would touch on a lot of toes because historically we're all taught to go to college. Historically, we're all taught to get an education and then you'll be great. And in the black community, education was one of those things that was hidden. It was privileged, and my basic audience is a bunch of educators. So I didn't respond to it because the I think my response in the article was enough, where I said that we have to stop putting we teachers, educators, mothers, black women, women in general, we have to stop putting these children in a box that creates more debt than wealth just because that's what we think is best. And as someone who is currently in debt, but I love what I do. Like I'm not changing any pipes. That's just not me. I can't do it. I can't think on that level. My brain doesn't operate in a logical, mechanical way. And one of the statements I made in the article was, I said, not every black boy has the intelligence to become a medical doctor. And that's what really pissed people off. Can I say pissed? It pissed them off because they automatically jumped on the fact I said not every black boy has the intelligence to be a medical doctor. And I said, but I don't have the intelligence to be one. I don't want to. That's too much work. That's too many. I have to remember too many. Like, you can't pull your textbook out while you're operating on someone. It doesn't work that way. So we had to stop forcing our children to fit into this box just because we weren't able to fit into that box 200 years ago. We have to meet them where they are and to help them really cultivate their own gifts and their own skills. Just like I'm not a mechanic. I'm not going to try to be. If I take apart a carburetor, it's going to stay taken apart. Car not moving, it's not budging, it's not doing anything. And we have to stop being so quick to be offended and actually look at what it is. So that's the part that really pissed people off, because I was just like, I agree with Booker T. Washington. If everybody needs a plumber, become a plumber. If everybody needs a teacher, become a teacher, but do it because it's your strength. That was the longest explanation and answer to your question. However, I think I got the point across. Any more? Nope. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is King Edward's Inc., which is someplace that's near and dear to my heart. They are an organization that works in Baltimore City, and they provide transitional and independent living for children who are in foster care. Why they are so important is that as someone who works with the DDA population, a lot of the clients we get aged out of DSS. Aged out of DDA, and aged out of DSS, and were unable to find housing to be able to do this. They can't take care of themselves. So what King Edwards does is, their program is to help children who are in DSS become independent. They help them with school, vocational programming, learning how to budget, learning how to do their bills, all of these other things. And they're also the only one of 4 programs that have a mother-baby program. Because apparently people don't want to provide services to children in foster care who have kids. Because let's be real, if I'm in foster care and I'm looking for a parent, or I'm looking to fill a void, eventually I'm going to have sex to fill that void. And eventually a kid is going to come. But nobody wants that liability. So what they've done is they actually created a program to help people become better mothers, children become better mothers, and help them get on their feet. One thing that I love about them is that they really, really come from the standpoint of training, teaching, and helping to facilitate and helping them become their best selves. If you want any more information on them, you can go to www.kingedwardsinc.org. As far as the blog, that is www.classroomactivism.blogspot.com. And if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to wrap it up because, Yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up because people just like walking through and everything. But just to tie it all in, when you are working with kids, especially those of color, you really have to tap into who they are subculturally and not just what we see them to be based on what we want them to be. It shouldn't be a matter of everyone goes to college and we're teaching in the context of this classroom, because at the end of the day they still have to leave. They still have to go home. One of the missions of this other organization that I'll be working with, and we'll be starting in the summer, which is Jazz, we are working to also give parents those same resources, because it doesn't make sense for us to empower our children and then children of all races, colors, creeds in impoverished areas, and then send them back home and then wonder why they're coming back to school still hungry. We have to figure out how to help the parents as well. So if there aren't any more questions, thank you so very much for your time. It was greatly and truly appreciated. And again, the blog is www.classroomactivism.blogspot.com. And thank you.